You're here because, well, you want to cut through the noise, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really get a handle on complex stuff without getting totally bogged down.
Yeah.
You're looking for those moments, those aha
Yeah,
moments where things just click.
exactly. Insights that actually shift how you see things.
And that's really what we do here on the Deep Dive. We take your sources, the things you're interested in, and we pull out the key knowledge.
Absolutely. We know you're busy, you want to be informed, but not overwhelmed. So we do the digging for you, filter out what's essential, and then explore it together.
So today we're plunging into this really fascinating document. It's called Leading with Insight, a biblical anthropology of discernment and flourishing.
Interesting title.
Yeah, and it tackles something I think a lot of people feel, this kind of split between spiritual insight, wisdom, intuition,
Right.
and practical intelligence, like data, facts, analysis.
They often feel like two separate worlds, don't they?
Totally.
Yeah.
But our mission today,
Yeah.
based on this source, is to show you that's actually a false separation.
Precisely. We want to unpack how bringing these two together, spiritual insight and practical intelligence, isn't just like a nice idea. It's actually fundamental. It's key to making really purposeful decisions and ultimately living a more flourishing life.
So moving beyond that, either thinking.
Exactly. Tapping into the power you get when they work together.
Okay, let's get into it then. The first big idea here is the foundation, right? This concept of the Imago Dei
Being made in God's image.
and how that connects to our ability to discern things.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is that the source presents the Imago Dei not just as like a theological label,
Okay.
but as something that actively equips you. It means you inherently have this capacity for reason, for observation, for critical thinking.
So it's not just a spiritual concept, it's also deeply practical.
Exactly. These aren't just spiritual gifts in a narrow sense. They're tools God gave you to navigate the actual world, meant to be used actively.
Right, right. And then there's Genesis 1.28, the part about dominion. Often that sounds like, power over things. But this document reframes it.
As stewardship.
Yeah, exactly. Responsibility.
Yeah.
It's about responsibly managing everything God's given us. And that definitely includes our intellect, our ability to think and analyze.
So discernment isn't just about following a set of divine rules blindly.
No.
It's more about applying biblical character and principles with wisdom to the messy, real-world situations we all face.
Okay, so that brings us to wisdom itself.
Yeah.
How is it defined here?
Well, it's not just about knowing a lot of facts or Bible verses. It's presented as seeing things from God's perspective. But, and this is key, that perspective is fueled by both divine revelation, what God directly shows us,
Right.
and by our own careful observation and analysis of the world. It's God's perspective applied to your reality using both revelation and data.
That makes me think of the Joseph example in Genesis 41, interpreting Pharaoh's dreams.
Perfect example.
He clearly got divine insight, right? The meaning of the dreams. But he didn't stop there. He used his intellect, his reason, to analyze the symbols, figure out the practical implications of the famine, and then propose a very concrete, data-driven plan.
Exactly. Store up grain during the good years? That wasn't just a divine whisper. It was strategic planning based on the insight. It was a blend.
So it wasn't an either. It was both insight and analysis working together. You mentioned wanting those aha moments earlier. Well, realizing the Imago Dei actually empowers your practical side, your thinking and planning that feels like one right there.
It really does. And this reframes what we mean by growth, too.
How so?
Well, growth isn't just about feeling spiritually good or, aligned. It's about getting better, more skillful at discerning God's purpose and then actually putting it into action effectively.
Becoming that wise steward we talked about.
Exactly. A thoughtful and effective manager of all the gifts and resources you've been given, including your mind.
And that connects directly back to what you might be feeling, that desire for meaningful work, for professional fulfillment maybe, and also that longing for clearer spiritual discernment. It's not about chasing two separate things.
Right. It's about weaving them together for a more integrated, purposeful life, where your work and your faith actually inform and boost each other.
Okay, so if this integration, this spirit and data thing, is so important and, frankly, biblical,
Yeah.
why is it often so hard? Why do we struggle with it?
Yeah, that's the next big question the document tackles. It explores the roots of this tension. Where does the struggle come from?
It seems like it goes pretty deep.
Yeah.
The source suggests this whole struggle kind of echoes that historical tension between faith and reason.
Right. that old debate.
And it posits that the fall itself introduced a kind of fracture, a separation between our intellect and our spirit.
Which makes sense, intuitively, and from that initial break, all sorts of obstacles can pop up.
Like what? What kind of hurdles?
Well, psychologically, there's the fear of failure.
Ah, yeah. That's a big one for many people.
And the text here connects it. Interestingly, it links it to rejecting God's grace, feeling like your self-worth is tied only to what you achieve.
Like you have to earn your value.
Exactly. It even draws an analogy to the Israelites who were scared to enter Canaan, the promised land. They almost preferred the misery they knew in Egypt.
Wow. Okay. What else?
Then there's imposter syndrome, that feeling of being a fraud.
Oh, yeah. Definitely relatable.
And here it's framed not just as low self-esteem, but almost as a denial of the gifts God has given you.
How so?
Because you're so busy comparing yourself to others, focusing on what you think you lack, instead of recognizing the value God already placed in you. It's like a subtle kind of pride, actually, trying to prove yourself instead of just accepting God's acceptance.
That's a really interesting take on imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm. And related to that, there's analysis paralysis.
Getting stuck in the research phase. Never feeling ready to act.
Exactly. Which, according to the source, often comes down to issues of control. A reluctance to trust God's sovereignty when things feel uncertain.
Wanting all the answers before taking a step.
Right. A refusal to surrender to the unknown. And sometimes it's simply a lack of confidence, maybe rooted in past failures or negative experiences.
So those are the internal psychological barriers. What about external factors?
Good question. There are definitely practical constraints too, like sometimes it's a genuine lack of information.
You just haven't done the homework.
Yeah, or haven't diligently sought out the knowledge needed. Proverbs warns about that, right? Seeking wisdom.
True.
Then there are things like unclear priorities, not having a clear vision aligned with God's purpose for you, or even just inefficient workflows, bad planning that just, kills productivity and makes action harder.
Makes sense. What about the environment around us?
Huge factor. The document calls these environmental factors. Things like not having good mentors, experienced believers to guide you.
Yeah, mentorship is key.
Or being in an unsupportive environment, maybe negativity at work or people around you with totally different values. That can be incredibly draining.
Right.
And sometimes it's just being overloaded. Taking on way too much, neglecting rest and self-care. That absolutely impacts your ability to discern clearly.
And finally, the source mentions motivation.
Right, motivational deficits. This could be feeling disconnected from your core values, pursuing goals that don't actually align with what matters most to you deep down.
Chasing the wrong things.
Yeah, or burnout, just running on empty, trying to do it all in your own strength without that spiritual renewal.
I think a lot of people can relate to burnout.
For sure. And interestingly, it even mentions the fear of success.
Fear of success. How does that work?
Apprehension about the responsibility that might come with success, maybe a lack of faith that God will actually equip you and support you if you do step up.
Wow. Okay, so thinking about all those barriers, the psychological, practical, environmental, motivational, and connecting it back to what you, the listener, might be experiencing, maybe feeling overwhelmed by all the research you're doing.
Right, or feeling stuck, paralyzed.
Longing for that deeper connection or clarity. But hearing those inner voices saying, you're not smart enough, you'll probably fail.
Yeah.
The document really nails it, I think, when it calls this a classic example of the tension between intuition and data.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, you might feel an inner nudge, a sense of calling towards something.
Your intuition.
Right. But then the fear, the lack of clear information, the analysis paralysis kicks in.
The data side feels missing or overwhelming.
Exactly. And you lack the confidence or the clarity to actually move forward. You're stuck between the feeling and the facts.
That description feels very accurate for a lot of people's experience.
So the big question then is, how do we move from that tension towards integration? How do we actually start doing this?
Okay, this is where the source gets really practical. It lays out an approach to build what it calls a wisdom plus data rhythm.
A rhythm, I like that. Not just a one-off fix.
Exactly. It's about creating a sustainable process, something that weaves together that prayerful reflection we talked about with informed, data-driven decision-making.
Becoming that wise steward.
Right. And the plan starts with focusing inward, first recalibrating your inner compass. Addressing those psychological hurdles we just discussed, the document suggests dedicating maybe 6 to 8 weeks to this.
Okay, what does that look like practically? Is there a first step?
Yes, a really key, actionable micro-win. Start a daily wisdom plus data journal.
Okay, tell me more about that. What goes in it?
It's simple but powerful. You intentionally jot down 2 things each day related to a situation or decision you're facing. First, your intuitive feelings or gut reactions about it.
Okay.
And second, any objective observations or pieces of data you've gathered related to it.
So feeling and fact, side by side.
Exactly. And alongside that journaling, it stresses the importance of spiritual disciplines. Daily prayer, spending time in scripture, maybe some mindfulness or meditation, to cultivate that quiet inner space, to make room to actually hear God's voice amidst all the internal and external noise.
Makes sense. Quieting the chatter.
Mm-hmm. And then actively working on replacing that negative self-talk.
You're not good enough stuff.
Yeah. Countering it intentionally with biblical truths about who you are in God's eyes, his love, grace, provision, maybe even memorizing specific verses that resonate.
Like affirmations, but rooted in scripture.
Precisely. And finally, for this stage, find an accountability partner, someone trusted you can share your journal entries and insights with.
Get some outside perspective and support.
Exactly. That really helps solidify the process.
Okay, so that's the inner work, the psychological recalibration. What's next?
The next phase shifts focus to gathering strategic intelligence.
Yep.
This is about tackling those practical constraints we mentioned. The timeline here is maybe 3 to 6 months.
Man, is there a concrete first step for this phase too?
Yes, another micro win. Identify maybe 3 potential career paths or directions that genuinely interest you. And then commit to scheduling just 1 informational interview each week related to one of those paths.
Talking to people actually doing it.
Right, getting firsthand insights, real-world data.
Smart. What else is involved in gathering intelligence?
This phase includes doing a skill gap analysis. So figuring out what specific skills you'd actually need for those paths you're exploring.
Right.
And then creating a concrete plan to learn or develop those skills. It also involves doing your homework market research.
Looking at job availability, salary expectations, industry trends.
Exactly. Getting a realistic picture and, of course, networking. Actively connecting with people in those fields, going to industry events if possible.
Building those connections. Okay, so inner work, then gathering external information. What else?
The third piece is about building a supportive ecosystem. And this isn't a fixed time frame. It's really an ongoing thing.
Makes sense. What does that involve?
Actively seeking out mentors, people who have walked a similar path, who can offer both practical advice and spiritual wisdom, and hold you accountable.
Having those wise counselors.
Definitely. And also finding community, joining groups or organizations with like-minded people who share your values and goals.
Surrounding yourself with support.
Mm-hmm. And crucially, setting healthy boundaries. Learning to say no to things that drain your energy or pull you away from your core purpose. Protecting your time and focus.
That's often harder than it sounds.
It really is, but it's vital for maintaining that rhythm.
Okay, inner compass, strategic intelligence, supportive ecosystem. Is there a fourth part?
Yes. The final element is about continuously reigniting your passion, keeping that motivation going. This is also ongoing.
How do you do that practically?
Well, it starts with value alignment, consciously connecting your daily actions and goals back to your deepest values and your sense of purpose. Why are you doing this?
Remembering the why.
Exactly. Then using tools like visualization, actually picturing yourself succeeding, feeling fulfilled in that integrated life.
Seeing the destination.
Right. Also, gamification can help breaking down those big, daunting goals into smaller, achievable steps.
Micro wins again.
Yeah. And celebrating those milestones along the way. Rewarding yourself for progress.
Keeping engaging.
And finally, regularly revisiting that Wisdom Plus data journal. Looking back, seeing how far you've come, noticing patterns in God's guidance and your own responses.
Tracking the journey.
It reinforces the progress and keeps you motivated.
Now, you mentioned the journal several times. The document offers something more specific too, right? A decision matrix.
Yes, it does. It's basically a way to level up that daily journaling, especially when facing bigger decisions.
Okay, how does the matrix work?
Instead of just free-form journaling, it gives you a structure with 4 specific columns for each decision or situation you're processing.
4 columns. What are they?
First column, intuitive feeling thought. What's your gut instinct, your initial sense about this?
Okay, the intuition part.
Second column, data point. What's a specific piece of objective information, fact, or observation you have?
The data part.
Third column, alignment. How well do the intuition and the data seem to line up? Are they pointing in the same direction? Is there tension or conflict? What insights emerge when you put them together?
The synthesis step.
Exactly. And the fourth column, prayer request. Based on all this, what specific guidance, wisdom, or clarity are you asking God for right now regarding this situation?
Okay, let's make that concrete. Say I'm considering a job offer.
All right.
Column 1, intuitive feeling. The interview felt a bit off. The culture seemed maybe intense.
Oh, I gut feeling.
Column 2, data point. Salary is 10% higher than my current role. Benefits look good.
Objective fact.
Column 3, alignment. Okay, there's a tension here. The money is appealing, data, but my gut feeling about the environment is hesitant, intuition. Need to weigh financial benefit against potential stress.
Good synthesis.
Column 4, prayer request. Lord, give me wisdom to see if this culture mismatch is a real red flag or just nerves. Help me discern if the financial gain is worth potential challenges.
Perfect. You see how that matrix forces you to actively bring the two streams together?
Yeah, it's not just listing them, it's making you compare and analyze their relationship.
Right. It pushes you beyond just having intuition and data to actually integrating them for more holistic, well-rounded discernment.
That seems like a really practical takeaway tool.
Definitely. It moves the concept into concrete action.
Okay, so we've got the foundation, the roadblocks, and this practical rhythm with the journal and matrix. Where do we go next?
Well, the next section really reinforces this whole idea of integration, connecting it back to that concept of flourishing we mentioned earlier. It's about moving beyond just feeling aligned to actually thriving.
Right, not just surviving, but flourishing, like that reigniting your drive idea.
Exactly. And the core message here is that genuine spirit-led living, even when it's just leading yourself, actually deepens your discernment precisely because you're honoring both those inner spiritual whispers and the concrete, observable realities around you.
You're not ignoring one for the other.
No. And biblical growth, in this view, is that journey from just getting by to really thriving, becoming more fully the person God actually designed you to be.
And the source talks about different areas where that flourishing can happen.
Yeah, it lists several potential dimensions. Professional or vocational, finding that meaningful work aligned with your gifts and values.
Okay.
Relational growth, financial wisdom, intellectual learning, creative expression, obviously spiritual connection, and even physical health and well-being.
A holistic picture of flourishing.
Very much so. But given what you, the listener, might be wrestling with, the focus often comes back to that professional, vocational piece.
Finding meaningful work.
And the spiritual piece, that desire for deeper connection and clearer discernment.
Yeah, those seem like common pressure points.
And it brings us right back to that core tension we keep discussing.
Feeling called, but lacking confidence or information.
Right. Or the flip side, getting so lost in the research and analysis that you kind of lose touch with that initial intuition or spiritual prompting.
Stuck in the weeds.
Exactly. And it briefly revisits those categories of roadblocks, psychological, practical, environmental, motivational, just reinforcing how they all feed into that feeling of being stuck or divided.
That sense of yearning for something more, but also feeling fear, struggling to figure out God's will, getting overwhelmed by information, battling negative self-talk.
The source really emphasizes that this whole experience is fundamentally about that disconnect, that tension between your intuition and the data you have or lack.
Okay, so it keeps coming back to needing both working together. How do we make that happen more consistently in our daily lives?
This leads into the next section, which is all about practical tools for integration. It's linked to that idea of spirit-led action.
Getting down to brass tacks again.
Pretty much. It hammers home that wisdom plus data rhythm as the absolute key to discerning God's will, that ongoing dance between prayerful seeking and informed decision-making.
And it circles back to the journal.
Yes, strongly recommending that micro-win again. Start the wisdom plus data journal today. Just the simple daily practice of noting an intuitive feeling and a relevant piece of information.
Making it a habit.
Exactly. And it also reiterates the value of those other tools we mentioned.
Like the affirmations in Scripture.
Right. Specific verses like, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, or Proverbs 3.56, trust in the Lord, lean not on your own understanding.
Those are good ones.
And practices like mindfulness and prayer to quiet the mind, plus the importance of that accountability partner.
Having someone to walk with you.
Definitely. Then it recaps the practical steps for gathering insight.
An external focus.
Right. Identifying those 3 potential career paths this week, another quick win to build momentum.
Right.
Committing to those weekly informational interviews, doing the skill assessment and making a learning plan, and the market research piece.
Covering all the practical bases.
And it reminds us again about cultivating a supportive environment.
Mentorship, networking, boundaries.
Exactly, those ongoing efforts to build the right support structure around you.
And finally, motivation.
Yep. Reigniting motivation, connecting actions to core values, that why, using visualization, gamification, breaking down goals, celebrating wins, and that regular reflection using your journal.
It's really weaving all those elements together into a cohesive strategy.
It is, and it presents that wisdom plus data decision journal with its 4 columns, intuition, data, synthesis, prayer, as the central tool for actively cultivating discernment over time. Not just waiting for it, but practicing it.
Okay, this practical framework is really helpful, but let's zoom out again. What's the deeper theology behind this? Why is integrating research and faith not just practical, but theologically sound?
Great question. The next section tackles exactly that, framing it as research-informed leadership, but the principles apply to leading ourselves too.
So moving beyond just personal application.
Right. It directly confronts that false dichotomy, that idea you have to choose between following the numbers and following the Spirit.
It says you don't have to choose.
Absolutely not, and it uses powerful biblical examples to make the case. We already talked about Joseph.
Divine dreams plus strategic planning.
Exactly. Then there's Nehemiah. He prayed intensely, right, for weeks. But then what did he do? He went and personally inspected the broken down walls of Jerusalem at night. He gathered data. He assessed the actual physical reality before he presented his plan.
Prayer and practical assessment.
Yes. And think about the Apostle Paul. Clearly led by the Spirit visions, promptings.
Obviously.
But look at how he operated, say, in Acts. He reasoned with people in the synagogues. He understood Greek culture and philosophy in Athens. He used observable human behavior in his arguments. He connected spiritual truth to the data of human experience.
He met people where they were, using logic and observation.
Precisely. So the document makes this really bold statement. Biblical leadership doesn't ignore or bypass insight derived from observation and analysis. It actually sanctifies it. It elevates it.
Wow, sanctifies insight. What does that mean?
It means seeing the capacity for insight, for understanding, for critical thinking as a direct gift from God himself. Part of that Imago Dei.
Okay.
It even brings in the Hebrew word bina. You might see it translated as understanding or insight.
Baina.
Yeah, and the nuance of bina is about more than just passive receiving of knowledge. It implies discerning, examining carefully, connecting the dots, and then responding wisely. Like Proverbs says, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and bina understanding.
So actively engaging our minds is part of receiving God's wisdom.
That's the argument. It reframes gathering and interpreting data, whether it's market trends, personal feedback, or city wall conditions, not as some purely secular, unspiritual activity, but potentially as a spiritual discipline itself. A way we partner with God, reflecting his own pattern of governance, which the Bible shows is always marked by wisdom, by careful timing, by clarity.
That's a powerful reframing. Viewing a data analysis as potentially spiritual.
It really shifts the perspective, doesn't it?
It does. So if we accept this theological basis, how do we put it into practice? How do we develop these discernment rhythms?
Right, the next section focuses on that moving from theory to regular practice. And the key word there is rhythm.
Not just reacting when a crisis hits.
Exactly. Establishing intentional, regular cadences, maybe monthly, maybe quarterly, for seeking and integrating insight.
What should be included in such a rhythm?
The suggestion is a combination of things. Dedicated time for extended prayer and focused listening to God. Not just quick prayers, but intentional quiet.
Right.
Also, a deliberate review of relevant information, both qualitative stuff like feedback or observations, and quantitative data, the numbers.
Looking at both the stories and the stats.
Precisely. And then intentionally consulting with trusted advisors, people who bring both spiritual maturity and sharp analytical thinking to the table.
Getting diverse perspectives.
Yes. And a really crucial point it makes here is about humility regarding data.
How so?
Recognizing that data is powerful, it can tell us what is happening. But it often doesn't tell us why it matters in the bigger picture, or what God's specific purpose is in it.
Ah, so data gives the what, but the Spirit often reveals the why.
That's a great way to put it. We're encouraged to approach data prayerfully, not just analyzing it logically, but asking, Lord, what are you showing me through this? Or is there a deeper story here that the numbers alone don't tell?
Interpreting the data through a spiritual lens.
Exactly. And acknowledging that sometimes the insight we gain, whether from data or prayer, isn't immediately actionable.
Patience might be required.
Yes. Spirit-led leadership and spirit-led living often involves waiting, trusting God's timing even when the next step isn't crystal clear right away.
Okay, this is making sense conceptually, but an example would really help cement it.
You read my mind. The next section provides exactly that, a compelling real-world case study.
Great, let's hear it.
It's about a national director for a discipleship ministry. And initially, this leader operated primarily on, well, prophetic impressions and strong relational intuition. They were very gifted in sensing things spiritually and connecting with people.
Okay, leaning heavily on the spirit side.
Pretty much. And that worked well to a point. But then they started noticing some worrying trends cropping up.
Like what?
Things like a significant drop-off in discipleship participation in their major urban locations, big disparities in engagement levels between different age groups, and really inconsistent results coming out of their volunteer training programs across different regions.
So problems were emerging that intuition alone wasn't solving.
Exactly. So instead of just relying on feelings or anecdotes about why this might be happening, this leader made a conscious shift. They decided to commission regular monthly insight reports.
Bringing the data side.
Precisely. These reports included things like localized surveys in those urban hubs, analysis of demographic data they already had, and, crucially, follow-up feedback forms from everyone who went through their training.
Gathering systematic information.
And they did this consistently, month after month. And by the fourth month, a very clear data-driven pattern started to emerge.
What was it?
The data consistently showed that their volunteer youth leaders, especially in those urban centers, were feeling incredibly overburdened and significantly undersupported.
The data pointed to a specific group and a specific problem.
Yes. The numbers clearly indicated widespread burnout among these absolutely crucial frontline leaders.
So the data revealed the what burnout in youth leaders.
Exactly. But then came the integration. Through prayerful reflection on this data, asking, Lord, what's the deeper story here? The leader discerned the why.
What was the why?
It wasn't just about workload. It was a deeper cycle of broken expectations, maybe unclear roles, and fundamentally inadequate support structures that were feeding this burnout.
So prayer provided context for the data.
Yes. And armed with that integrated insight, knowing what was happening, burnout, and why broken systems expectations, they could finally take targeted, strategic action.
What did they do?
They reallocated resources to provide much better, more tangible support for youth leaders. They launched a specific mentorship program pairing experienced leaders with newer ones. And they even implemented sabbatical rotations to proactively combat future burnout.
Wow. Concrete actions based on that combined insight.
Exactly. And the source reports it led to a significant positive transformation in their ministry's effectiveness and leader retention. It's a powerful illustration of what happens when you stop choosing between data and discernment and start integrating them.
That really brings it to life. Okay, so for someone listening who is inspired by this, where do they start right now?
It circles right back to the beginning, really. The final section emphasizes starting your own wisdom plus data decision journal.
Back to the journal.
Yes. It stresses that this whole journey of integration begins quite simply, with a dedicated notebook or file and a deliberate posture of listening to God, listening to the data, listening to your own intuition.
And it suggests a rhythm for using it.
Maybe weekly, maybe monthly, whatever feels sustainable. And each entry should try to capture 4 key things.
I guess. Intuition, data, synthesis, prayer.
Close. It frames it slightly differently here for the ongoing journal.
Okay.
1, data point. Start with a specific, measurable insight or piece of information that stood out to you.
Got it.
2, spiritual reflection. Ask, what is the Lord highlighting to me about this data or situation? What seems spiritually significant?
The discernment piece.
3, discerned direction. Based on the data and the reflection, what seems to be the next right step? Is it a clear decision, an action to take, or perhaps a sense that you need to wait and listen more?
The potential action or non-action.
Right. And 4, feedback loop. Later, reflect on what actually happened after you acted or waited. What were the results? What are you sensing now? This closes the loop and informs future cycles.
I like that feedback loop component. Learning from experience.
Exactly. Over time, this journal stops being just random notes. It becomes, as the source beautifully puts it, a sacred archive.
A sacred archive.
Yeah, a record of God's faithfulness and guidance in your life, revealing not just the external changes and decisions, but also your own internal growth and formation through the process.
That's a really inspiring way to think about a journal.
Isn't it?
So as we kind of bring this deep dive to a close, what's the main takeaway we want people to hold on to?
I think the core principle is this. Truly spirit-led living, spirit-led decision-making isn't about shutting one eye. It's not choosing spirit or data. It's about learning to see clearly with both eyes open, integrating the clarity that data can bring with the profound wisdom that comes from spiritual discernment.
So that the choices we make aren't just reactions to circumstances,
Right.
but are actually redemptive, purposeful, contributing to flourishing.
Exactly. You, the listener, are not being forced into a false choice between using your God-given intellect and pursuing intimacy with God.
It's not either.
No. You're invited into a way of living, leading, and deciding where both insight and intimacy work together, serving your deepest purpose and enabling you to truly flourish.
I love the image the source uses near the end, picturing like the spreadsheet and the scripture kneeling together side by side.
With the Holy Spirit breathing life and wisdom through both of them. It's a powerful metaphor for that integration.
It really is.
Yeah.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Just take a moment now or later today. Think about one specific area in your life, your work, your finances, a relationship, a big decision, where maybe you've been relying really heavily on either your intuition or just the hard data, but not really both.
Leaning too far one way.
Right. And just ask yourself, what might happen if I intentionally brought the other perspective into the mix, if I consciously tried to integrate my wisdom and the data in this area? What new clarity, what fresh direction might emerge?
That's a great challenge.
And maybe, just maybe, today's the day to take that first small step. Grab a notebook, open a file, and start that wisdom plus data journal.